And fraud is on the rise in Canada, and it's becoming harder and harder to spot. Every day, scammers are finding new ways to impersonate trusted institutions like banks, government agencies, and even legitimate investment firms. They're using phone calls, emails, fake websites, and increasingly sophisticated tactics to trick people into handing over their money or personal information. And the numbers are staggering. According to law enforcement and regulatory agencies, Canadians are losing millions of dollars each year to financial fraud, and many of the victims never see that money again. I'm now joined by Brendan Caldwell, director at Caldwell Securities Limited, to shine a light on how this kind of fraud actually plays out in real life and what you can do to protect yourself. Brendan, thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you, Teresa.
Now, Brendan, we don't typically talk to you about fraud, but you had wanted to share a story of fraudulent activity that actually happened to someone that you know. So, do you mind telling us about it?
Yeah, on a no names basis, or mostly no names basis, except for the financial institution involved. Uh, Good friend of mine who's a senior citizen who has some health challenges got a call purportedly from the Bank of Nova Scotia, where she has an account, asking quite innocently, it seems, whether she'd been in Edmonton and done any financial transactions in Edmonton. Well, no, she said she hadn't. Well, said the lady on the phone, and it was a lady on the phone, the woman who sounded quite trustworthy, uh, that she'll be getting a call from such and such a police officer who will get details because there's been some evidence of fraud. And sure enough, the police officer called and asked for a whole bunch of details of her accounts. This was later on a Sunday evening, which in itself should be an oddity because banks are consistent on one thing: they don't work weekends. So she gave all this information to this purported police officer who was himself very convincing, um, gave his so-called badge number and everything. And then she had misgivings about it over a Sunday night. And by Monday, she found out all her money was gone from her account and her line of credit had been racked up to the max. I don't know how it's going to work itself out with the Bank of Nova Scotia, but it is I mean, a real push has been on in terms of these frauds to up their game to beyond robocalls or email messages to actual real human beings, or perhaps they're AI that sound like real human beings, um, delivering a very convincing one-two punch of the bank and the so-called police, calling to make you feel insecure and thereby give up all the information that had been secure up to that point beforehand.
And Brendan, that's honestly a heartbreaking story. And the problem is it happens too regularly now. So what should anyone do when someone calls them and tells them that they have been compromised?
Well, I would thank them for the call, ask to take down their name and phone number, and then, or if you really think it's legit, if you think there's any chance it's legit, take down the information. If it sounds even halfway off, it's not legit. Very unlikely that anybody is ever going to call you out of the blue and say this or that or the other. And in no circumstance do you provide any information to people over the phone that call you. If they're initiating contact, it's likely a problem. Because if they're calling from the bank, they already have all your information anyway. They don't need you to provide that to them. Um, but if you really think it might be legit, thank them very much for their call. Write down their information, and then just call your regular banker. Um, and if you get a call on a Sunday night, it's not from the bank. Call your financial person, your investment professional, or the branch you deal with, or the number that you actually know, and check it out. Is pick a name out of the air. Is Jane Doe, who called me from this phone number, does she work for the bank? The odds are 99 to 1 that she doesn't. And again, nothing needs to be done so urgently. If you have been compromised by a something in Edmonton that has nothing to do with you, well, that's the bank's problem. It's not yours. If you give all of your information over to somebody and they clean out your account, the bank's going to maintain that it's your problem, not theirs. I don't know that that's legally the case, but you're now in the unfortunate position of fighting the bank for them having handed over money that they really shouldn't have. So if it really comes to it, just hang up. We actually have a whole advertising campaign that we ran, I know, a year or so ago. Just hang up, because particularly, and we ran it in, I don't know how many different languages, a couple of dozen different languages, because particularly new Canadians, older Canadians, otherwise vulnerable Canadians, or any two of the above, are going to be particularly susceptible to someone with an authoritative sounding voice calling up in a language that they may not understand perfectly, asking for information. It's probable, in fact, it's probable enough that there's a whole industry around it, that people will hand over that information. The
And
right answer
honestly,
99% of the time is just to hang up.
well, and Brendan, the advice that you're giving is so important because we live in such a fast paced environment that people think when they need to answer the phone, they have to deal with it right away. But there's nothing wrong with hanging up or saying, you know what, I'll give you a call back later, writing everything down, and then going back and calling your institution. Sometimes it's just taking that second to think about, you know what, maybe something wasn't adding up. This seemed a little weird, and just removing yourself from the situation. But I want to ask you about dealing with an investment firm. We know that you're regulated by the Canadian Investment Regulatory Organization. Now, we've heard stories about companies say that they are part of the organization, but they actually aren't. What should we look for?
Well, again, this is a slightly different circumstance where someone's calling you out of the blue, as both registered and unregistered investment professionals will call someone out of the blue and ask if they can be of help with their money. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But if one is bothering to make the claim in the first call that you are registered with CIRO, the Canadian Independent Regulatory Organization, if you're bothering to make that claim in the first, you probably aren't. It's a question that you could legitimately ask an investment person or someone purporting to be an investment person. Are you a member of CIRO? Are you a regulated entity? And it's an answer that question can be answered, but it's a strange thing to actually begin with. So if someone's beginning by insisting how legitimate they are, that's a pause. To your point about any cold call out of the blue, or any situation in life in general, there's largely no harm in pausing. In interactions, both personal and professional, taking a moment to pause, to think about it, to call back, is probably going to end up you in better stead than if you just reacted. Again, personally and professionally, but with investment matters, doubly so.
And how can we protect ourselves against fraudulent investment firms?
Well, you mentioned the Canadian Independent Regulatory Organization, CIRO. Um, there is a website where one can actually look up, okay, so you're calling from this firm or that firm, you're calling from, then you can actually go to the website and there's a list of firms that are there. And if they're purporting to call from such and such a firm, you can call that firm and say, hey, does John Smith or Jane Doe actually work for you? This is the number I got. This is the information they had. And I mean, if you like what they have to say, there's no harm in dealing with them if you've actually checked it. But realistically, the large majority of the clients that have come to our firm have come because they've seen us out in public and have called in to us. They've been referred by someone who's been happy dealing with us. Referrals or using one's own initiative tend to be a better source in financial services and other things than just a cold call out of the blue, particularly if someone is insistent on saying how great they are before the questions have even been asked.
Well, Brendan, this is such an important conversation, and thank you for taking the time to unpack it with us today. So, thank you.
Thank you, Teresa.